The sad truth of the matter is, video games in recent years are just becoming worse. And if you find one that is really great, it's amazing, you hear about it for days and days because it is the exception to the rule. Much like hitting that bell and helping me get to 2K. Now, I've talked about it in previous videos, but I guess I'll have to talk about it again. The video game market hasn't been doing great. You could narrow it down to a million different things. You could blame everything, you could blame nothing. The fact of the matter is, it's still suffering as a result. There's a ton of games built on Unreal Engine 5. Maybe it's the fault of the engine. Is it Unreal Engine 5 for being as bad as it is, or is it the fault of the developers for not knowing how to use Unreal Engine 5? It's just an example. Is it bad optimization? Is it relying on frame gen too much? Sex sells, so if you make a woman your mascot in your game, you're playing with fire. I mean, everybody knows who 2B is, but nobody really knows what the fuck she does or what her story is. Only a few dedicated people really give a fuck enough to find out. If I was making a game, I don't think I would want to go that route, okay? Maybe they can justify it, but the moment you start doing that shit, you're just going to get a superficial audience, people who don't give a fuck, and that is like the most damning thing you can do for yourself, because sure, you might have there might be a lot of service interest, but that's all it's going to ever be. You're not going to have a real audience doing that. Now, what if you shove real-life political messages into your game on either side of the aisle? Nobody wants to see that shit. Even if they're the ones being affirmed, you're there to play the game, not be told what to think, how to act. You're there to experience a story, if there is a story. Play the game, have fun with the gameplay, not be told a fucking message. No matter how major or minor it might be, it is the fact of the matter. I know political cartoons exist, but if I were to make a work of art, and that is what most video games should try to be, I wouldn't want to muddle the message, right? Because at any moment, whenever you come off as insincere, that is whenever you begin to lose it. You'll start to hemorrhage people, whether your own staff, your audience, whatever it might be. And sometimes, some studios, some games don't recover from that. What about funding? It's become a critical point in the last few months that games might become more expensive because of development costs, paying staff, okay, how long it goes from each phase of production. Games are going to cost hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and that cost is largely passed onto the consumer because they are more than happy paying these prices. If you didn't pay for this $70, $80, $90, $100 game, then guess what? You probably would not see any more of that price tag. You would see it at a comfortable 60, maybe 70, which it has been for years. And whenever a game is successful and it's below that price point, you could name a few things here, name a few names. Everybody starts talking about it because, once again, it is the exception to the rule. It proves that you don't need a giant development team. You don't need to have a giant development cost. You don't need to be blowing millions of dollars in order to make a good work of art, a good game. Now, if you view it as justifiable and worth it, well, I mean, I guess you could, but I feel like every game should be judged on a case-by-case basis. No matter how you look at it, every game in its development is going to have some fault. It might be of its own or of somebody else's entirely. The point is, every game is going to suffer from some quirk, some bad thing. And there's going to be good things. For the last few years, though, it feels like it's been just a sea of red with very little green. So whenever you hear about a game, you'll hear about it for the next few days. That's how it works. Because there's not really much else going on in the gaming sphere right now. Nothing's really happening. Sure, there's new releases, but they don't really hit it off. And for the majority of people, these releases might be, oh, this game released today. Did you see the trailer? Did you hear about how that all the controversy about such and such. Well, that's about as far as it goes. It's a bit of idle chatter. What about AI? I know that on Steam, I know not everybody gets it on Steam. Steam was required to have the developer disclose their use of AI in games. The use of AI in games, it might be to help troubleshoot code. It might be used to write code entirely, generate assets. Okay, no matter what it's used for, the developer has to disclose their use of it, or they will violate whatever fucking agreement that is with Steam. So there's another hot topic for you. Should AI be used in games? If so, should it be regulated? Should it only be used to troubleshoot, to refine, to fix? Or is it okay to take the reins, so to speak, and spearhead some more of these issues? So if the developer is only a coder, it's a one-man fucking team, he can't draw for shit. He says, oh, well, I'll just use AI to generate these assets because I'm broke as fuck and I can't afford to pay anybody. Or what if he's a writer? He can't code, but he can draw. So he's able to write and draw, but he needs someone to help him code. Well, he should have learned to code, right? No, because it's 2025. He can go to any number of different LLMs out there and have them teach him code. Will it be good code? Will it work? Probably not. But you can engineer those prompts. I think it's called prompt engineering. You can tell these different LLMs the same thing a million times, like a rubber duck process. And keep working and working, running the code every time to see if it works. Sure, it might be brute forcing it, but if you know absolutely nothing about code, that will work, and far quicker than if you were to sit down and research and learn a language all by yourself. It'll be quick and sloppy, but if you keep working and working and trying, then eventually you'll get something out of it. And it'll be another conversation about the quality of the work. Besides, if you know how to go through line by line and check out and say, oh, well, so if this is supposed to work here, and I have everything working up to here, what's wrong with the rest of this? Like using an AI in place of a duck, right? At this point, that's what we moved on to. And in that direction a little bit, what about art? Is it better to have a stylized game, or is it better to rely more on graphics? Of course, if you ask me, I would say it's better to have a stylized game, one that isn't so performance heavy, because you can still make a good game look great and still retain that style. And once you do that and it's not as performance heavy, then you can reach a bigger audience. And that is what you want to do. You don't want to polarize your audience by having all of them need a 5090 because you decided, hey, I want to make my game look fucking amazing at the cost of only having 10 people play it versus 1,000 or 10,000. This matters. Sure, it might look great, but if nobody's left to review your game to play it, then what the fuck is the point? Besides, if you look at Steam, I think the hardware survey it is, the majority of consumers have what, like a fucking 3070, a 3060? Okay, very, very mid-range cards. You know what that means? That means you should be aiming for the average. That's what I would do. I wouldn't be overshooting it. You could undershoot it, I guess, at the cost of graphics, at the cost of how it looks, how it runs, etc. But I would personally just shoot for the average, okay? Graphics cards are expensive. Nobody can shell out money that often for those things. They want to buy games more often. And on that concern, well, I mean, what about the price, man? Maybe see, but it's hard to say what you should make the price because there's a lot of things that should go into making the price. Whether it's 30, whether it's 40, whether it's 60. So we can't just say, oh, well, it should be this, because in reality, yes, it should be that price, but that's not how these companies work. If it was an indie team, they can make it whatever they want so long as everybody gets paid, everybody's happy. They can make it whatever price they think justifies the playthrough of the game. So if it's like a 2-hour game, fuck it, dude, make it $5-10, right? That's fair. I'm going to talk about music here for a little bit. very briefly. So I've gotten into making music on my own. And one of the topics that I've heard pretty regularly is that in order to be a musician, it's not just about making the music. In fact, making the music is very little of the process. The actual process is marketing, treating it like a business. So when we talk about gaming as a business, how much of the budget goes towards marketing? How much of the marketing campaign do you think we will see reflected in the price? Because, of course, if we had no marketing, no one would see the game. You could say, oh, yeah, it'll spread by word of mouth, but it's not the same. All of the big games out there generally have a set portion of the budget set aside for this reason. Because if they don't, they would likely be dead in the water compared to what their projections are. So I guess my final question on that matter is, have games become too commercialized? Are there too many big name studios in the mix? Or do we not have enough? Do we need more of this? No matter what, I feel like indie games are always the go-to. They're not great a lot of the time, but sometimes you will find a true diamond. And it is a shame because they don't have that reach, okay? They rely on word of mouth. They rely on those reviews, on people saying, hey, you should check this game out. It was actually really cool. It doesn't have shit on social media, and it's struggling to even be heard in the first place. And you have shit like that happen every day. Whereas these big companies with these big budgets say, oh, well, hey, we're going to drop 100 million on this easy, and it's all you're going to hear about for the next week and a half. To circle back to politics for a second, if you're making a commentary heavy game, I guess, for lack of a better word, what topics would be safe to address? Because it's hard to say what you should and should not talk about. You might be considered brave if you talk about a certain topic, and you might be ridiculed if you bring up another topic. It's hard to toe the line whenever you're doing shit like this, and so it's much safer to just refrain from it entirely. Of course, this isn't the video gaming market. Somebody out there is always going to say, well, attention should be drawn to this. And as video gaming is an art, a passion, a medium, so to speak, then we should be raising attention to this issue. It happens all the time, every day. And it doesn't even have to be spoken about. If it's just there in the background, if it's part of the setting, you don't have to raise strict attention to it. You don't have to say, oh, hey, look at this, check this out. Because for some of the more attentive gamers, they will see it, they will understand it. So it doesn't have to be directly in your face. I guess to end it off, what is the deal with newer games? Because I've brought up a variety of different topics, different problems. What is the major malfunction with video games now? Why have they become the way they have? What is wrong with video games nowadays? Why do we prefer to go back to older games? Not like retro games, but like a handful of years, 2020 and on. Why have we decided collectively to go on to those older games? We might buy and play a newer game for about a week, 2 weeks, a month, okay, but for the most part, nobody's really playing any newer games. Why is that?